The Bride Who Waited. The wind swept through the empty streets of Border Town, carrying with it the low hum of a distant storm and the faint scent of dust and rain. At the wooden gate that marked the town's edge, a woman stood still, her figure framed in twilight, her white shawl clinging to her shoulders like a final promise she couldn't release. Clara Hayes had been waiting there every evening since the spring. The townsfolk had stopped asking why. They simply nodded when they passed her, whispering that she was the last bride still waiting. Others had long learned that bordermen rarely came home when they said they would. Some rode north chasing fugitives, others west chasing freedom. But Clara's husband, Marshal Thomas Hayes, chased something colder, justice, the kind that kept him from warmth, even when it was standing right beside him. Her eyes drifted to the horizon where the sun sank behind crimson dunes. The light painted the gate in gold, then in gray, before vanishing entirely. Still, she waited, hands folded, posture composed, her silence holding both dignity and despair. Behind her, the faint creak of a saloon door broke the stillness. Nora Lee, the town's seamstress and Clara's only friend, approached with a cautious smile. "You'll catch the night chill again," Nora said softly. "You don't owe the moon your patience, you know." Clara's lips curved faintly. "He said he'd be home before the harvest. That was 3 harvests ago." Nora's voice wasn't cruel, only tired. "If love is a seed, you've watered it long enough. Let it rest." Clara looked past her, back to the gate. "Love doesn't rest," she murmured. "It just waits until it forgets what it was waiting for." The silence that followed was heavier than the evening air. Nora touched her arm, then left her there, understanding that no comfort could mend a woman's loyalty, not until it broke on its own. When the moon rose, pale and watchful, a sound rose from the darkness beyond the gate. Hoofbeats, uneven and slow. Clara stiffened. Her heart quickened, torn between hope and dread. It was too early for Thomas. His return was always heralded by the clang of the town bell, the marshal's escort. This sound was solitary. A rider emerged from the gloom. His coat was torn, his hat low, and the outline of a rifle hung across his back. His horse limped slightly, kicking up trails of dust as it slowed before her. "Ma'am," he said, voice rough from travel. His accent wasn't from around here, somewhere deeper south, like old whiskey and regret. She nodded politely, her hand resting on the gatepost. "You're a long way from any inn. Town closes early." "I'm not looking for whiskey or shelter," he replied. "Just direction. They said there's work under Marshal Hayes." Clara's breath caught. "You found his gate, though not the man. He's away on patrol." The stranger dismounted slowly, favoring one leg. Under the moonlight, his face came into view, Eli Ward, though she didn't know his name yet. His eyes were sharp but weary, the kind of eyes that had seen too much and remembered too little. "I can wait," he said simply. Rode too far to turn back now. There was something in his tone, not insistence, but a quiet endurance that mirrored her own. Without thinking, Clara unlatched the gate. "You can stable your horse near the well. My husband will see you when he returns." Their eyes met for a brief moment, hers cautious, his hollow. For reasons neither understood, the silence between them felt almost familiar. He tipped his hat, then led his horse away, his shadow melting into the dim light of the stable lamps. When he was gone, Clara realized she was still gripping the gate. Her pulse was unsteady, not from fear, but from something she couldn't name. Something alive, something dangerous. She drew her shawl tighter and turned toward home. Inside the small house, the walls echoed with absence. The clock ticked, steady as her heartbeat. On the mantel rested a framed photograph, Thomas in uniform, stern and proud. She traced the edge of the glass with her fingertip, remembering the man she once believed in, the one who spoke in promises, not commands. Outside, the wind picked up again, carrying faint notes of a harmonica from the stables, a slow, broken tune that sounded like sorrow learning to sing. Clara stood by the window, the sound threading through her silence. Somewhere in that melody was something she hadn't felt in years. Not happiness, not hope, but recognition. The kind that says, "You are not the only one who waits." The night deepened. The gate swayed lightly in the wind, as if whispering her secret to the stars. Tomorrow, she would wait again, but now, she knew she was no longer waiting alone. The cowboy's secret. The morning after the stranger's arrival came quiet and gray. Border town still slept under a thin veil of dust, the horizon glowing faintly as dawn broke over the far mesas. From her kitchen window, Clara Hayes watched the stables, steam curling from her teacup like restless thoughts. He was there again, the cowboy from last night, working in the yard as though he had belonged to this land all his life. The horse that limped through the gate now stood steady under his care, its flank brushed smooth, its mane shining with fresh water. He moved with the unhurried precision of someone who had nothing left to prove, only something to survive. When he finally noticed her at the window, he nodded. It was a small gesture, polite but weighted, as though the night before had left an understanding between them neither dared to name. By mid-morning, Clara carried bread and coffee to the stables. A simple courtesy, she told herself. "You'll need this," she said. "Marshal Hayes won't return for another week. You may as well eat while you wait." He took the tin cup from her hands carefully, his rough fingers brushing hers for only an instant. "Obliged, ma'am. I'm Eli Ward." "Clara," she replied. Then, after a pause, "Hayes." He smiled faintly, though the name seemed to weigh heavier on him than on her. "Marshal's wife. Didn't reckon he was the marrying kind." "Few do," she said, half smiling. "Duty doesn't leave much room for kindness." Eli nodded, sipping the coffee. His eyes, pale beneath the shadow of his hat, carried the kind of sorrow that didn't come from loss alone, but from living too long with it. "Duty has a way of leaving people behind," he said. "Sometimes it leaves them standing by a gate too long." Her heart faltered. How could a stranger speak the truth she'd never dared to confess aloud? They spent the morning in quiet company, Clara sweeping the porch while Eli repaired a broken fence post. The world seemed to shrink to the soft rhythm of their movements, the scrape of wood, the rustle of hay, the creak of old hinges. Conversation came in fragments, each word careful, carrying more meaning than it revealed. He told her he once rode with a company across the southern plains, soldiers, ranchers, wanderers all. "One woman waited for me," he said she'd be there when I came back. She wasn't. Clara turned to him then, the broom frozen mid-sweep. "She left. She found steadier ground," he said. His tone wasn't bitter, only resigned. "You can't fault a heart for wanting shelter." She understood too well. Her eyes drifted to the distant hills, where her husband might have been chasing outlaws or shadows. It hardly mattered which. "And yet," she said quietly, "some hearts stay, even when the house is empty." Their gazes met, hers soft and uncertain, his steady and searching. In that moment, the distance between them shifted, though neither moved. When Nora came by that afternoon, she found Clara kneading bread in the kitchen, her hands trembling, though she hid it well. "You've company at the stables," Nora teased lightly. "Heard half the town talking about the stranger who fixed 3 fences before breakfast." Clara kept her voice calm. "He's waiting for Thomas. Or for something else," Nora said, watching her closely. "Be careful, Clara. Loneliness can mistake gratitude for love." Clara didn't answer. The dough beneath her palms felt alive, beating with her own unease. That evening, the light turned amber again, the same hour she always waited by the gate. But now Eli stood there instead, tightening his saddle strap, eyes fixed on the setting sun. "You always wait at this hour," he said quietly, without turning. "It's habit," she replied. "Habits mean something once," he said, "till they don't." Clara looked toward the horizon, half expecting her husband's silhouette to appear, tall, certain, unyielding. Only the wind came. "You think he's forgotten?" she asked, not realizing she'd spoken aloud. Eli's answer was soft. "I think men who serve too long forget what home looks like." Something fragile broke inside her then. Not her loyalty, but the illusion that loyalty alone could save her. She wanted to tell Eli that she understood, that she'd lived years inside an empty promise. But words would have made it too real. The air grew cooler. Somewhere beyond town, thunder rumbled again. Eli adjusted his hat and looked at her with quiet gravity. "You shouldn't stand here after dark. Folks might talk." "Let them," she said, a faint tremor in her voice. "They talk anyway." He almost smiled, a small, tired expression that said more than laughter could. "You're a strong woman, Mrs. Hayes." "Strongness," she whispered, "isn't always choice." The wind swept through, carrying the scent of rain. For a moment, both stood silent, two souls bound by what they'd lost rather than what they wanted. When he walked away, Clara stayed at the gate, watching him until his figure dissolved into the gathering dusk. The ache that filled her chest wasn't guilt yet, just the haunting realization that for the first time in years, she no longer felt invisible. And as the first drops of rain began to fall, she turned toward the house, toward her husband's name, her vow, her silence, all of it trembling beneath the weight of a single, unspoken truth. The waiting had changed, whispers beneath the storm. The storm came without warning. One moment, border town lay beneath a restless sky. The next, thunder rolled across the plains like a cannon's echo. The wind tore through the fields, rattling doors and tossing dust through every open window. In the distance, the faint light of the border posts vanished, swallowed by rain and darkness. Inside the Hayes homestead, Clara moved through the house lighting lamps, her hands trembling. The roof groaned as wind pressed hard against it, rain lashing at the shutters. Her husband was still gone, somewhere beyond the line of the storm, chasing justice or ghosts. Through the window, she saw a figure running toward the porch. Eli Ward, drenched to the bone, his hat pulled low, his coat flapping wildly. She opened the door before he could knock. "Come in," she said over the roar of rain. "You'll drown out there." He stepped inside, dripping water onto the wooden floor. The air between them crackled, not just from the storm, but from the unspoken tension that had been building for days. "Didn't mean to intrude," he said, setting his hat aside. "The stable roof's giving in. Thought I'd warn you for the horses broke loose." She nodded, brushing wet strands of hair from her face. "You did right." For a moment, neither spoke. The storm filled the silence, hammering against the walls. The only light came from the lamp on the table, its flame trembling between them. Eli's voice was low. "Never seen rain come down this fierce. Almost feels like it's trying to wash something clean." Clara's lips curved faintly. "Maybe it's trying to remind us what's still dirty." He looked at her then, really looked. The flicker of the lamp caught the lines of exhaustion around her eyes, the weariness that years of waiting had carved deep. Something inside him shifted, a tenderness edged with danger. "You deserve better than an empty house and a fading promise," he said quietly. Clara turned away, clutching the shawl around her shoulders. "Better isn't always right." Eli took a step closer, his voice barely audible over the storm. "And right doesn't always keep you warm." The words lingered between them, like lightning suspended in air. Clara felt her pulse stutter, her breath catching in her throat. Every reason she'd used to keep herself anchored, loyalty, duty, faith, trembled in that moment, fragile as glass. "I shouldn't be here," he murmured. "Then why are you?" He hesitated. The answer wasn't simple. It was carved from every night he'd spent alone, from every mile he'd ridden trying to forget a woman who'd stopped waiting for him. "Because I know what it is to wait," he said finally, "and I know what it is to break." Her eyes met his. The storm outside roared louder, as though the world itself demanded confession. "Do you think hearts can heal," she asked softly, "when they've been broken by the people they belong to?" He moved closer, slow and certain. "Maybe they just learned to beat for something they shouldn't." For a heartbeat, the distance between them disappeared. The air smelled of rain and earth and something electric, something forbidden. His hand brushed her arm, tentative at first, then still. The touch was nothing more than the truth they'd both tried to deny. Clara didn't pull away. She closed her eyes, and in the darkness behind them, the world fell quiet. When she finally stepped back, the moment shattered. not with guilt but with understanding. "We can't," she whispered. "I know." Outside, the thunder cracked like a verdict. The storm began to ease, leaving only the soft patter of rain against the windows. The two stood in silence, neither moving, both knowing something irreversible had been born in that pause. Not love yet, but its dangerous beginning. Eli turned toward the door. "When the marshal returns, I'll move on," he said, his voice steady but hollow. "You won't have to see me again." Clara's throat tightened. "You'll leave because of me." He shook his head. "I'll leave because staying would make it worse for both of us." He reached for his hat, pausing once more before stepping outside. "You're not the only one waiting, Clara," he said. "Some of us are just waiting for forgiveness." Then he was gone, swallowed by rain and darkness. Clara stood alone in the quiet that followed. The lamps flickered, their flames bending with every breath of wind. She pressed a hand to her chest, as if to steady something breaking inside her. The house felt smaller now, the air heavier. Every corner held his absence, the warmth of his voice, the echo of his footsteps. And when she glanced at the window, she thought she saw him one last time, a dark silhouette moving toward the stables, his head bowed against the storm. She whispered into the silence, not sure whether she was praying or confessing. "You should have stayed." But the only reply was the sigh of rain on the roof, soft, steady, unrelenting. Outside, the gate creaked in the wind, the same sound that had once meant waiting, now transformed into something else entirely, a reminder that some lines, once crossed, never close again. And though she could still feel his touch like a secret flame, Clara knew that when dawn came, she would still be the bride waiting at the border gate. Only now, she was waiting for something that would never return. When the broken right away. The morning after the storm carried an uneasy stillness, the kind that felt borrowed, as though the world had held its breath and hadn't yet decided to release it. The fields shimmered with rainwater, the air cool and heavy with the scent of mud and memory. From her window, Clara Hayes watched Eli Ward saddle his horse in silence. He moved deliberately, each motion slow, certain, final. The decision had already been made. The leaving was only its shadow. She could have turned away, pretended not to see him, pretended the storm hadn't changed anything. But lies, she'd learned, don't heal the heart. They only hide its wounds. When she stepped outside, the ground was soft beneath her boots. The sun hadn't yet cleared the ridge, and the sky remained pale and bruised, like something that had wept too long. Eli glanced up as she approached, his hat low, eyes unreadable. "Didn't mean to wake you," he said. "You didn't." Her voice was quiet, but sure. "You're really leaving?" He tightened the last strap on the saddle. "Your husband will be home by nightfall. He'll want his house straight and his name unbent." The words struck her harder than she expected. "And what do you want, Eli?" He hesitated. The question hung between them, heavy as the lingering rain. "To stop wanting what isn't mine." She looked at him then, really looked, and saw in his expression not guilt, but the kind of sorrow that comes from losing something you never had the right to hold. The wind stirred her shawl. "If things were different," she began. "They're not," he said gently, finishing for her. "And maybe that's what saves us." Silence followed, soft and unbroken. The stable door creaked, the horse stamped. Time itself seemed reluctant to move. Finally, Clara spoke. "You said last night you were waiting for forgiveness. Maybe you already found it." He smiled faintly. "Forgiveness don't come easy. Not for folks like us. But maybe," he paused, eyes lifting to the horizon, "maybe it starts by leaving before we ruin what little good remains." The ache in her chest deepened, though she didn't try to stop him. She knew some hearts were meant to cross paths, not share the same road. Still, the words left her lips before she could swallow them back. "I'll remember you." He met her gaze one last time. "Then remember I left so you could forget." He mounted his horse, turned it toward the open gate. The same gate where she'd waited so many nights. Once for a husband who never returned on time. Now for a man who could never stay. As Eli rode away, the sun finally broke through the clouds. The light fell across the wet ground, painting the world in fleeting gold. His silhouette grew smaller, dissolving into distance, until only dust and silence remained. Clara stood there long after he'd gone, the sound of hoofbeats fading into her heartbeat. She thought of everything she'd done and everything she hadn't. By afternoon, the town stirred again. Children's laughter carried faintly from the road, and Nora Lee appeared at the gate, worry and understanding written in her face. "You look like you've been standing here since dawn," Nora said softly. Clara managed a smile. "Maybe I have." Nora followed her gaze to the empty horizon. "He's gone, then?" "Yes." Nora's eyes softened. "And the marshal?" "Due tonight." There was a pause, a long, knowing silence between women who understood what words could not fix. "Whatever happened, Clara," Nora said finally, "don't let it turn you cruel. Love makes fools of us, but it shouldn't make us hard." Clara looked down at her hands, still trembling from what they hadn't held on to. "It hasn't made me hard," she whispered. "Only honest." That evening, Thomas Hayes returned, his presence filling the doorway like a shadow too large for the room. His face was sunburned, his eyes weary, his uniform stiff with dust. He kissed her forehead out of habit, not affection. "You been all right?" he asked, his tone clipped. "Yes," she said. The lie came softly, like a sigh. He didn't notice the way her voice trembled. He didn't ask what the storm had taken or what it had left behind. Instead, he removed his hat, set his badge on the table, and began to speak of men he'd caught, laws he'd upheld, things that mattered more to him than she ever had. Clara listened, but her mind drifted to rain on rooftops, to a scarred hand brushing hers, to a truth that had come and gone like thunder. When night fell, she rose quietly from her chair. On her way to the door, she took off her wedding ring and placed it on the mantel beside the photograph of their wedding day. The glass reflected her face for a moment. Older now, wiser, freer. Outside, the gate swayed in the night wind. She touched its edge, the wood cool beneath her palm. Somewhere out there, Eli was still riding, maybe toward peace, maybe toward nothing at all. But the thought no longer hurt. Clara turned back toward the house. The waiting was over. What remained was living, whatever that meant, whatever it cost. Above her, the stars began to pierce the clouds, quiet and endless. And though she would never see him again, the whisper of the night carried his parting words across the plains. "Forgiveness don't come easy." She closed her eyes and answered the wind. "Maybe it just takes time."